Wiggle, wiggle.
Like.
Hey, Muffin here. So I had a subscriber request, thought it was a fun idea. One of my very first challenge videos I ever did. Challenge just meaning like 1T-34 American heavy tank first like 7 or however many it takes to take on an X amount of higher tier tanks. And this one, I had done a Fury challenge back in the day where I had taken 4 Shermans against 1 Tiger. And in this one, it was a little backwards, almost as if Fury was a German movie from the German perspective against the IS tank, the Tier 7 Russian heavy tank. And the Panzer IVs being a Tier 4, this version going against those IS tanks. And we're going to see just how many of the Panzer IVs can take on IS tanks. So in this first one, just kind of starting out with the classic beginning, there's just 4 Panzer IVs against just 1 IS tank. And then we're just going to really turn up the heat, increase the amount of Panzer IVs, increase the amount of IS tanks just slightly depending on balancing and ease. We're going to make sure this is real difficult for both sides and quite challenging and fun to see. So they're closing in on the IS tank. Also, we're going to mix up the maps around a little bit the first couple rounds on Malnikova, but this actually was quite fun. Just see just how much red that IS tank has. Definitely from the Panzer IV perspective, need APCR to get through that thick metal. And 1 Panzer down, 3 left, trying to circle him. And that lower plate just being weak enough to penetrate. IS getting down on health. Can he win? Or are the Fury German tanks gonna win? 2 Panzer tanks down, and that is it. So that was just the first round. Now we're gonna do 7 Panzer tanks against 2 IS tanks to see what happens. All right, so here we go. So first one, IS was a loss. Now we're gonna turn up the heat a little bit. Just kind of see what will happen now. So the Panzer IVs have the numbers on their side. Both tanks, I wouldn't say are very accurate. That's one thing about the Panzer IV, is it goes against a lot of what the German tanks are known for, is their accuracy. But you can see here the Panzer IV is not that accurate. It takes a little bit of time to aim in. So that is one really big difficulty that the Panzer IV also has, along with the IS tank. Russian tanks, now they're known not for their accuracy. But man, that 122 millimeter shooting a Panzer IV does some crazy damage. As a matter of fact, there was a game, and you'll see it in the replay, where an IS tank just ammo racks Panzer IVs multiple times. So closing in, seeing quite a bit of red here. Now, my subscribers are just absolutely amazing. I want to thank you guys so much. Anyone that wants to help with these, everyone's more than welcome. Go ahead, join my Discord server, get the movie crew roll. Love to have everyone on the field. So Panzer IV is trying to circle these IS tanks. and taking a derpy chunk out of these Panzer IVs every time they get shot. And one Panzer down. And these IS tanks are still looking fairly healthy. Even from the side, these Panzer IVs taking shots at them, the tracks are absorbing a lot of that damage and not breaking. And things are not looking too good for the Panzer IVs. Still, two fairly healthy IS tanks, and only 4 Panzer IV, now 3. And in the next game, we're gonna now do 11 Panzer IVs versus 3 IS tanks to see how it'll go. And then depending from there, if the IS tanks win, then we're gonna do less IS tanks and more Panzer IVs. But I believe actually in the next one, since the IS tanks easily took on 7 Panzer IVs, now we're gonna check out and see, before we actually go into the 11 Panzer IVs, we're actually gonna see what this looks like if only one IS tank comes across 7 Panzer IVs. Now, both these tanks saw action in World War II, had faced each other, and so this also makes this kind of a historical concept, this battle between these two historically iconic tanks. Now, Garion's a good player, so we'll see just what happens if one IS tank can take on 7 Panzer IVs. So got the first hit off there, and they're closing in. And unfortunate miss. This is not a situation you want to miss anywhere else. And he is taking the brunt of an unfortunate again. And I must say, that is the classic Russian accuracy right there. So losing a lot of hit points here. So 7 Panzer IVs are coming across as quite deadly and very overwhelming for these this IS tank. So Panzer IVs dominated against one IS tank. So now we're gonna max out the room. So this time it's gonna be 11 Panzer IVs against 3 IS tanks. And as mentioned, we'll adjust the numbers. We'll give one more to the team that loses in this one in the next round, and then one less tank to the other side. Panzer IVs charging in. IS tanks just cutting right through the town. IS starting to take some hits. Just getting hit from just about every side. Panzer IV is trying to circle and do what they can. These IS tanks looking out for their own. Unfortunate miss and only a track shot on that Panzer IV. You could just see that difficulty, definitely needing APCR to get through that IS armor. Now it's kind of cool actually seeing these tanks. Now, Blitz isn't 100% accurate when it comes to how these tanks were historically. As a matter of fact, a lot of the tanks were actually slower. They didn't function quite as well as they do in Blitz. They didn't quite maneuver. As a matter of fact, tanks historically, you could technically move and shoot at the same time, but it was so incredibly inaccurate because every bump or rock you went over, they didn't quite have the technology that they do nowadays. So most of the time during World War II, when tanks were fighting each other, they were stationary and then taking aim on their targets and then firing. So they didn't have this maneuverability. But the point I'm getting at that actually makes it quite cool is there's some similarities between the difficulty of seeing what it was like, kind of like for a Panzer IV to come across an IS, and how difficult that was, how dangerous. Now there was one AFK in that last one. This next one wasn't, there was no AFK, and honestly, even with there being an AFK, it didn't really, I don't think it would have made a difference. They got absolutely annihilated. So last game here, now there's only 2 IS tanks against 12 active Panzer IVs, and we're going to see how this turns out. It looks like it's going one way at the beginning, but it gets a lot harder for them, and this actually turns into be quite a close match. Great game from the subscribers. Now they know where they are. Some trying to circle others. IS tanks moving in from one side, Panzer IVs coming around the other. Tried to get out of there, but wasn't able to quite make it out without taking a shot. Ooh, and what a hit. Like I said, when you see the 122 millimeter in action against lower tier tanks, even though, yeah, Blitz, like I said, isn't quite historically accurate, there's not hit points, tanks don't have that in real life, but you can kind of get a feel for that powerful effect of the 122 millimeter against something like a Panzer IV. Panzer IV's taking a beating, but just watch the comeback. These IS tanks doing pretty good, being very aggressive on these Panzer IVs, but start bleeding a lot of hit points. Catches him on fire. Great positioning from this Panzer IV. Now about 6 Panzer IVs left against 2 IS tanks that are losing a lot of hit points. Unfortunate track shot on that Panzer IV. This is down to the wire. Only about 1 hit left on each IS tank. Super close. 2 Panzer. Oh, and that is about it. So from what we're able to see here, as long as there were 2 IS tanks together, they could basically take on an army of a maxed out room of Panzer IV. So I hope you enjoyed the vid. I know I had a great time, just like I do with all my vids. This is the Muffin here. You guys stay cool and keep tanking.